Yeah, great to be here. This is Dan Reeser from Acala, and I'm joined here by my good friend Terry from the Tapio team. Thanks to Terry for staying up. It's 12:30 at night where he is, so appreciate him doing that. And everyone, hopefully you had a good experience in the hackathon. Whether you were building maybe parachains or dApps on various parachains, we always appreciate people like you guys coming and building on Polkadot. Um, Today, we're going to go through a bit. I'm going to keep my part relatively short. This is actually more of a feature of Terry and what Tapio is building, and how you as developers can integrate that into your parachains or into your dApps on Polkadot. So I'll start out with some background on Acala, just brief overview of the different kind of building blocks that you can leverage. And then Terry will go into Tapio, their tDOT product, and then how specifically you can actually work with their product. So this may be familiar to some people, but just as a brief overview, this presentation, of course, is a little bit more on the technical side, given that this is a hackathon. And I just wanted to remind people around Acala's tech stack because it's relevant to the rest of this presentation. So I'll start from the bottom. So this white part here, you can just think of as our chain as itself, with these various palettes or features built into the chain. So the purple are representation of dApps. So as you all know, you can build palettes that you can also maybe refer to as dApps within the chain. You can also build dApps in the EVM on any of these chains who've implemented that. In Acala's case, we have liquid staking and Acala swap as a DEX that were built into our chain from the beginning. And then the cool thing was Terry and his team basically upskilled themselves in Substrate and were able to build this whole synthetic asset protocol as a palette using Substrate. They actually came from Ethereum, and he can mention some of that in his part, but they kind of upskilled themselves in Substrate after coming from the whole world of Solidity. Other features such as like on-chain scheduling, being able to pay gas fees in any token, these things are all available in Substrate. And then, as you may know, with our EVM, we actually launched it about a year after some of the people who launched the Frontier EVM. And the reason why is we built our EVM custom so that it could interact deeply with Substrate, because the Acala team were big believers in Substrate and the future that that's going to bring. So we didn't want to sacrifice and give up all of that at the Substrate layer just to be able to offer an EVM. So we have this adapter. It basically uses precompiled smart contracts to allow anything in the EVM to interact with anything at the Substrate level. So this would allow people to build Solidity-based applications in our EVM, but then also, for example, be able to pull Substrate tokens into the EVM, or be able to leverage the scheduler, or be able to interact with the DEX and so on. Just a quick overview of our ecosystem. Don't need to go into any detail here, but I've been working with a lot of these teams for a couple of years now. As developers, I just wanted to highlight a few kind of stats. This is data as of last night. So in terms of where the demand is and where the users are going, in Polkadot's short history, which is since we all launched kind of in January or so, the most sent and received XCM transactions a majority of transactions are always either going to or from Acala. So if you're building an application and you want users and you want demand, there's really no better place to build than with Acala and with the accompanying products, similar, including Tapio, that are built on the platform. Similarly, this is XCM transfers into any parachain, so the demand again is flowing to Acala for this year. I guess 27% or so of XCM transactions are going to Acala. And then TVL, just another stat that we tend to look at sometimes in the DeFi world. Again, Acala kind of leading the category there as well. So lots of liquidity, lots of demand on the chain. So great place to build alongside of us. A few things of just in general what Acala is building towards. So we of course have built the AUSD stablecoin at the core of our chain. This is not kind of an equivalent to USDC, USDT, BUSD, these fiat-backed stablecoins. Those are great for payments and the stablecoin general kind of stablecoin use case. What AUSD and other decentralized over collateralized stablecoins like DAI are used for even more is for a credit system, because these stablecoins are issued with collateral backing so that people can take out credit against their assets they don't want to sell. In our case, DOT, in DAI's case, Ethereum. So it's a different lever that you can pull as a user, and also a different mechanism that you can integrate as a developer. Liquidity. So Terry will tell you about tDOT. We've built Liquid Dot, which is a liquid staking protocol. These actually work hand in hand, and he'll explain how that works. But again, it's another way to boost liquidity of the whole Polkadot ecosystem. And then third, this is kind of going with our two-pronged approach more on the business side, is one, DeFi native things, and two, permissioned enterprise level DeFi is our second focus in that kind of two-pronged approach. So that leads me to this slide. Many of you know we're working with Current. That product is underway. And then working also with other institutions like Alluvial, who is doing a liquid staking protocol for DOT via Acala, and that will all be KYC enabled. So these institutions, a lot of them have been sitting on the sidelines because they're not able to participate in DeFi the way it's built today. So being able to provide them a place where they can go and know exactly who all the other entities playing or working in that environment are will allow a lot more institutional capital to come into the Polkadot ecosystem via Acala. This is Alluvial. They actually rebranded to Liquid Collective. They've recently been announcing things on their Ethereum-based products, and then they'll be building with DOT on Acala, and also various other chains like Avalanche. So I'm going to wrap my part up, just bringing you back to this slide. Terry is going to be talking about Tapio and what they've built with their stable asset protocol and tDOT, and specifically how you as developers can integrate that into your project. So Terry, go ahead and take it from here.
Great. Thank you, Dan. Yeah, as Dan said, hope everyone had a good experience with the hackathon. Good choice, I would say, for trying out the Polkadot ecosystem. Us as a team, Tapio team, we actually never got a chance to participate in hackathon. We actually went straight into, building in Polkadot because we were quite early. Like we started building on Polkadot almost 2 years ago, and Acala was actually one of the first teams that we spoke with and sort of began this relationship. I'll share more towards the end of the presentation on our experience with building on top of Acala, but I want to start by introducing what we are building at Tapio and our flagship product, tDOT. So basically, in very simple terms, Tapio protocol is a synthetic asset protocol. So when I say synthetic asset, a lot of people will think about mirroring real world assets, or mirroring stocks or FX onto the blockchain. So we're completely opposite of that. Okay, we're not that type of project. Instead, our synthetic asset is catered to solving for the different versions of DOT liquidity within Polkadot specifically. Okay, so what that means is, right now in Polkadot, there are two main, I guess you could call it, applications for DOT. One is staking, because obviously Polkadot is a POS network. And then the other one is crowdloan, okay, helping parachains to secure a slot auction. So these two applications have actually created many different formats of DOT. Okay, so but we can generalize it and call them crowdloan DOT and staking DOT. You can see that on the diagram on the right-hand side, right underneath at the bottom. So our flagship product at Tapio is tDOT. Okay, so this is a synthetic dot that we've introduced. And the reason why we wanted to introduce this product is because we sort of foresee the Polkadot ecosystems to have many different versions of crowdloan dot as well as staking dot. Okay, we can kind of see, Dan was mentioning just now that Acala has introduced their own version of liquid staking dot. And there are other parachain teams that have also introduced their own version of liquid staking dot. Okay, so these are different formats. Okay, these are different formats of dot liquidity. And in our opinion, it's great that these parachain teams are offering these solutions, but at the same time, it really fragmentizes the liquidity because, from a user's point of view, right, or from a developer's point of view, when you come into this network, you see so many different versions of, let's say, liquid staking dot. Which one should you build, or which one should you integrate to your DApp, or which one should you integrate to your parachain? So it becomes quite convoluted. And then same thing for crowdloan dot, because every parachain that have secured a slot auction, that have secured a slot auction, have a version of their own crowdloan dot. Okay, so anyways, what I'm trying to say here is, tDOT is basically a unified standard for staking and crowdloan dot derivatives. Okay, so you can kind of look at it as the synthetic asset that sits on top of the different versions of crowdloan dot, as well as staking dot, as well as native dot. Okay, and the whole purpose of introducing tDOT is to really remove the liquidity fragmentation. So there's one standard version of dot that can be used across the entire Polkadot ecosystem, keeping the underlying benefits, which I'm going to talk about. So tDOT is backed by a liquidity pool composed currently of native dot and dot derivatives. So the product that's live right now is actually backed by dot and liquid staking dot. And we're the first synthetic dot format that's launched on the Acala network. We've been working with the Acala team actually for close to 2 years, as mentioned. So when Dan mentioned that parachains only went live at the beginning of this year, we were actually one of the teams that were able to follow very shortly right after Acala has launched. We were able to launch the Tapio protocol, as well as introduce the tDOT asset as well. Next slide, please. So diving into the mechanics of how tDOT actually works. So tDOT, this synthetic asset, you can look at it as it's ultimately powered by a system. Okay, it's called the stable asset system. Okay, and the stable asset system has two main functions. Okay, one, it is a stable swap engine, basically. Okay, because this stable swap engine within this, it contains native dot and liquid staking dot. Okay, so which means users can actually trade freely between these two assets, because ultimately they are they are one form of dot. Okay, so this is a stable swap function. And then from a user's point of view, from a liquidity provider's point of view, if let's say you provide either dot or LDOT liquidity into this stable swap engine, instead of getting a simple LP token, what you're going to be getting in return is tDOT. Okay, so tDOT here is the synthetic asset. And this synthetic asset is actually backed by the underlying liquidity, which is DOT and LDOT. Okay, so that's the stable asset mechanism. And what I want to highlight is this stable asset mechanism is actually integrated directly into the Acala stack. Okay, so the stable asset is actually built in substrate palette. So what that means is, we're very closely integrated with the Acala team. We're not just another protocol sitting on top of Acala. Like our stable asset function is actually within the Acala parachain. So there are a number of benefits which I'm going to explain. It's actually outlined in the diagram on the right hand side. So one of the benefits of building on the substrate level is to really be able to utilize or leverage or carry on some of the existing functions that the Acala parachain team has already built out. So remember I said, tDOT is backed by a liquidity pool of DOT and LDOT. So what that means is right now, there's, the redemption period for liquid staking DOT for LDOT is 28 days. If let's say, a user holding on to LDOT, doesn't want to wait that long. Okay, they want to redeem immediately. They can do that via the Acala DApp. And that function is ultimately backed by the stable asset engine. Okay, so what that means is if you're holding LDOT, you want to redeem instantly. You don't want to wait 28 days. You can do that. Okay, and that LDOT switching back into DOT, this process or this liquidity is directly backed by us. It's backed by Tapio's protocol stable asset system. Okay, so going into the other benefits, right? Because because the stable asset system is built as a substrate palette, we can actually integrate with substrate parachains. So the diagram on the right basically outlines that, let's say on parachain X, they have their own format of liquid staking DOT. Okay, we can call that X DOT. What we can do is we can directly integrate the stable asset palette on parachain X and basically bootstrap a liquidity pool made up of native DOT and X DOT. Okay, so users on this parachain X, what they can do is they can provide either DOT or X DOT liquidity into that pool. And through XCM, tDOT actually gets minted on the Acala network, and it gets transferred back to the parachain X. So this is actually a very innovative approach to leveraging XCM, and one of the reasons why we've made Acala as sort of the source chain for minting tDOT is because of there's a number of reasons, but one of the reasons is because they have the AUSD product, as well as currently the Acala team actually has the highest number of liquid staking DOT liquidity on their chain. So this allows the minting of the tDOT function to flow freely to the chain where the liquidity was contributed initially. Next slide, please. Okay, so yep.
Yeah.
So I'm going to quickly talk about why integrate tDOT into your DApp? Ultimately, I kind of talked about this at the beginning. There's two main reasons, right? Like one is because there are liquidity silos within the Polkadot ecosystem. As I mentioned, there are different versions of liquid staking dot introduced by parachain teams, and each of these liquid staking dot have their own mechanism for accruing yield, as well as the unlocking period might be different. So this actually really fragmentizes the liquidity. It's actually very hard to use, and that leads to the adoption challenge. Okay, because each of these format is different. It's going to cause some of these, right now we're still early, but when we think about it, 2 to 3 years down the line, there's going to be a situation where some of these uh, liquid staking dot derivatives or crowdloan dot derivatives becomes sort of the long tail. So, and I think we can all agree that for long tail liquidity, it's very difficult to get adoption. Okay, so this is why it's important to have a unified standard sitting at the top where it rolls up the benefits of the underlying staking or crowdloan derivatives at the same time maintaining that utility. Okay, so ultimately, our value proposition for tDOT is that we minimize the liquidity fragmentation and increase the overall capital efficiency so that whether you're a builder for a parachain or you're a builder for a DApp, you can have the best format of DOT integrated for your system. Next slide, please. So how to integrate tDOT? There are two levels of integrating the solution. On the substrate level, this is more focused towards parachain teams. As I mentioned, the stable asset palette can actually be integrated directly into the parachain. So, the question might come up as, why would somebody want to integrate that? Why can't they build it out themselves? The short answer is yes. The parachain team can build it up themselves. They can build up the stable asset module themselves. However, we already have this solution that has been built out and battle tested. Tapio has been live for more than 7 months, and we've actually went through rigorous testing. And right now, it's a very quick and easy solution to actually integrate the stable asset palette into your parachain. So that actually saves the parachain teams, quite a lot of work from building out the stable swap engine from scratch. And again, it's not tested. Ours is already tested and has went through many different types of edge case testing. So that's on the substrate level, integrating directly into the parachain. From DApp builder's perspective, tDOT can actually be integrated from the tDOT transfer through XCM, which I kind of mentioned. So how that works is, let's say the DApp is living on parachain X. Okay, we can call this XDApp. It's living on parachain X. Parachain X needs to open up XCM with Acala. And once that's opened up, tDOT can actually move freely between Acala and parachain X. And then once tDOT moves from or to between these two chains, it also carries forward, the underlying yield. Okay, because one thing that I forgot to mention is very important is tDOT actually accrues, because tDOT right now is made up of DOT and LDOT, and LDOT has a intrinsic yield. So that yield actually gets accrued to tDOT. Okay, so that's one part of the source of yield for tDOT. And then the other source of yield for tDOT is it comes from the stable swap. Okay, because if let's say the user is swapping, there are users swapping between dot and LDOT, there's a fee that gets charged, and this fee actually gets distributed back to as a form of yield for tDOT. So what I want to say is, from a builder's perspective, if let's say you're building a D app and you're looking for a form of stable and consistent with dot with yield and utility, that's where sort of tDOT fits, sort of plugs the gap. Next slide. So before so these are just a few links to for those who are interested, whether you are a parachain team or whether you're looking to build your own DApp. It's just some links to look into our solution. But before that, before I wrap up, I just want to quickly mention, our experience with building, number one, on the Polkadot ecosystem, and in particularly, building on top of on the Acala network has been tremendous. As I mentioned, like we've been building on Polkadot for almost 2 years now, and Acala was actually the first team that we started deploying our solutions, and our relationship got a lot closer and decided to build our solution on the substrate level. The level of support, I would say not just from the development side, but also from if let's say you guys aspire to build out your own project, the Acala team is actually one of the finest builders in the space to actually provide support on all levels. So yeah, like I want to just wrap up my part of the presentation here, and I guess I'll turn it back to Ernie.